Tonight on Mark Latham's Outsiders, we'll be looking at the rise of left-wing political violence. I'll be also talking to Senator David Leyonhjelm about big tax cuts for millions of Australian households. Also, Bernard Gaynor will be here to talk about the dreadful impact of the so-called diversity agenda, political correctness, on the Australian Defence Force. And we've got Zeg's cartoons, we've got your letters and feedback, and you've got to wait for it at the end of the show. The left lunacy of the week, the biggest left lunatic you'll ever see. Stay tuned. Trigger warning viewers, you've entered a very unsafe space. This is Mark Latham's Outsiders, Australia's most politically incorrect news and current affairs show. I'm coming to you in front of the wonderful Exchange Hotel in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, and I'm bringing you a show that is very much no political correctness, no social engineering, no support for identity politics. This is just traditional Australian straight talk. And of course, Mark Latham's Outsiders, we're in partnership now with Rebel Media, that wonderful international organisation. To sign up to register for our cause, please go to the website marklathamsoutsiders.com. Just give that again, it comes up on the screen, marklathamsoutsiders.com. And we've also got a very important petition that's running to teardownThatCurtain.com. TeardownThatCurtain.com, no religious segregation, no separatism at the Auburn Pool under the Cumberland Council in Western Sydney. We're standing up for the important issues and we're bringing it to you straight with none of the agendas or ideology or hidden stuff that you get in the mainstream media. Now, can I just say something about the rise of political violence? I mean, a lot of people worry about what's happened to our political system. Very tribal, very intense, a lot of stuff going on that's very concerning, not just radical Islamic terrorism, but the rise of left-wing political violence. Now, I think we need to understand what's happening in the current environment. Sure, the issues have changed with the fall of the Berlin Wall. A lot of people say that the information technology, social media in particular, has added to the intensity of debate. That's certainly true. People can put out these bodgy sites and bodgy addresses on Facebook and Twitter and get behind them and hurl all sorts of abuse without any form of accountability. And it has brought an intensity and viciousness to the political debate that we haven't seen before. But I want to put to you this argument. Another cause of the intensity and the ferociousness of modern political debate is the decline, the restrictions on free speech. We think about free speech as a basic human right, and that's certainly true. You don't know how important free speech is until it's taken away from you. Until you lose it yourself, you don't understand the loss of citizenship, of participation, of getting involved. And free speech has a valuable role in our democracy, a crucial role in our democracy, because free speech is one of the great releases of a pressure valve. If someone feels passionate about an issue, they need their free speech in the sensible democratic forums to get their view across. If they haven't got that free speech, then of course the pressure can build up and spill over into unwanted aggression and violence in the system. So when the left contain free speech, they diminish our democratic system. They diminish the quality of debate. And of course the left themselves are the worst practitioners of the new political intensity and violence. And a lot of it's been directed at Donald Trump. It's amazing, the whole catalogue now of threats and violence directed at the new American President Donald Trump. It started in the campaign. They thought he couldn't beat Hillary Clinton, and some of the stuff was dreadful. Let's listen to what Robert De Niro, one of these shocking Hollywood celebrities, had to say during the US election campaign about Trump.
He's an idiot. Colin Powell said it best. He's a national disaster. He's an embarrassment to this country. It makes me so angry that this country has gotten to this point, that this fool, this bozo, has wound up where he has. He talks how he wants to punch people in the face. Well, I'd like to punch him in the face.
Well, dreadful stuff, and there was no condemnation of that from the left. In fact, one of the left-wing journalists in the press gallery, Catherine Murphy, cheered on that rubbish, cheering on violence. De Niro saying he wanted to punch the then candidate Trump. And of course it got worse. Trump, against all the odds, beat Hillary Clinton. He was sworn in, and then the very next day in the Women's March, are women proud of this? Women's March, this is what Madonna, the ridiculous Madonna, had to say about the new president.
Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
How bad can it get? Well, beyond Madonna, Kathy Griffin, this B-grade comedian hanging around all the celebrities and TV shows in the United States, she put in perhaps the biggest shocker of the lot. Let's have a look at what she wanted to do with Trump's decapitated head.
It's like that the moment right here, like that's the jail moment.
Yeah, that's literally what it's like.
Alright, so you want, I hold it back here.
Same exact
Close
thing we
this.
just did. That's it.
Okay.
Rotate a little bit this way. Other
This
way,
way or
other way, other way.
other way?
That's it right there. Pull it up. Just
And then just last week, one of the left-wing heroes, Johnny Depp, straight from all his domestic violence incidents, he's a left-wing hero, and this is what he had to say about President Trump and possible assassination.
I think he needs help. And, I don't know, a lot of wonderful dark places he could go. A lot of Doc Martens in the... It's just a question. I'm not insinuating anything. By the way, this is going to be in the press. It'll be horrible. But I like that you're all a part of it. When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Well, the last time an actor assassinated a president, it was John Wilkes Booth assassinating President Lincoln in 1865. So there's silly Johnny Depp glorifying that assassination and pleading for another one against Donald Trump. So the left really are doubly damaging our democracy. They're spreading these violent notions and suggestions as young people in the popular culture. Some people still look up to these characters, unfortunately, so they're spreading that rhetoric, and on the other side of the coin, they're restraining free speech, building up the pressure in the system where people can't have legitimate points of view and legitimate outlets for their political opinions. So it's a real problem we've got, and we've seen this sort of stuff spill over into the Australian political environment. Just recently, Andrew Bolt attacked on the streets of Melbourne by Antifa, this left-wing outfit. Andrew Bolt fighting off the violent left. And it's not just the physical blows, the rhetoric is becoming more violent all the time. Now, one of the worst offenders, of course, is Clementine Ford, one of the leading left feminists in Australia. She lives by a shocking double standard. She thinks it's available to her to abuse people, intimidate them, threaten them, all sorts of abuse and language hurled at her opponents on social media and beyond. She's into it up to her neck. But the double standard, of course, if anyone says anything about Clementine Ford, straight away she's a couch-fainting feminist. She falls over, shocked and horrified that anyone could be possibly critical of her, throw back some of the abuse her way. So she lives by a shocking double standard, and the rhetoric she uses, wow, it's way out of control. We know Daisy Cousins from Mark Latham's Outsiders. She's been on the panel. She's very well spoken and puts her point of view quite sensibly. This is how she had to debate Clementine Ford last week on Triple J Hack. And this is how Ford handled herself.
Because the reason I find that I and other conservative women do cop this kind of abuse specifically from feminists, left-wing feminists, and are defended, but for the most part, by men, actually, is because feminists, I don't think, can tolerate women who disagree with them. And while you talk about wanting more female voices in the public realm, wanting more female voices in positions of power, it seems to me, particularly with the way you've spoken about, say, esteemed conservative journalist Rita Panahi, you said no matter how hard she tries, she'll never be a white male. And some rather nasty things you've called Miranda Devine as well, profanities that I won't say on this program.
I called her a cunt.
Yeah.
Whoa, there it is.
I think perhaps my point is you only want women up there who agree with you.
So there's one of Australia's left feminists, apparently got supporters out there. She's happy to call another woman a cunt, not once but twice. Now, I think what we need to do is recognise in Australia and beyond, we can lower the temperature of political debate and get back to decent democratic principles if we promote free speech. Free speech is the great release of the pressure valve in politics. People who are passionate, care about the issues they need to express their point of view in a sensible, logical fashion. If we had fewer restrictions on free speech, we'd have a much better debate. We wouldn't have all this nonsense of left-wing political violence. We wouldn't have people like Clementine Ford being tolerated at Fairfax and the ABC and other places. Free speech should prevail. Free speech is the great equaliser and opportunity in our democracy to take the heat and the intensity out of political debate and be much more constructive. So I think that's an important thing that everyone should be aiming at. It's what we try and promote here at Mark Latham's Outsiders. It's free speech first and foremost. No political correctness, none of that social engineering, no restrictions on what people can say in terms of legitimate political views. And we're going to hear more of that after this short break when we talk to Senator David Leyonhjelm. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders, broadcasting in front of the Exchange Hotel in Kalgoorlie, one of the great outsider watering holes there in WA. And I'm joined, happy to say I'm joined by Australia's leading libertarian, the Liberal Democrat Senator David Leyonhjelm. David, thanks for joining us on the program. And I want to start with an image out of parliamentary sittings in the Senate last Thursday, if we can bring it up. It's you and Cory Bernardi versus the rest. David, a couple of Davids versus Goliath. Explain to us what was happening here.
We were in the process of dealing with the education Gonski funding, Gonski 2.0 or 2.1, however you want to call it, last Thursday in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And Cory and I were trying to limit the amount of government spending. So Cory moved an amendment which would limit the commitment to funding for 4 years. That failed. Then I moved an amendment which would reduce the indexation of government funding of schools from 3.5% down to, locked in for 10 years, down to the CPI. Mm-hmm. Now the problem is that if inflation is nowhere near 3.5%, which is very likely, and it's certainly well below that at the moment, what we're doing is increasing funding of schools in real terms after inflation, well over inflation, so it's ending up costing us more.
So you and Cory Bernardi voted for the limit Correct. On the indexation, and the entire rest of the Senate chamber voted in favour of more spending.
That's right, as you saw there from that picture, there's Cory and me on one side and everybody else on the other side.
Well, hopefully you're wearing that as a badge of honour, But this $23 billion extra that's going into schools funding, it's a waste of money, isn't it? Australia hasn't got a school resourcing problem, we've got a school quality problem. Correct. So you and Cory also voted against the $23 billion.
We did. We voted against the bill at the final readings. And you're quite right, it is an education quality problem, not a money problem. We've been throwing money into school education for the last decade. In real terms, it's gone up by 50 to 70%, depending on what state you're in. And education standards have been falling. The government acknowledges that. The Minister, Simon Birmingham, was talking about that for months before they brought out this bill. Then all of a sudden, they've got this new plan. We're going to out-Gonski, and it's going to cost an extra $23 billion over the next decade, another $1.5 billion over the forward estimates period. And aren't we clever? We've grabbed Gonski off Labor. I mean, it was ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. And but Labor fought it because they said, "Oh, it's not enough money." In any case, we own Gonski was their argument, you know. So, but basically they were saying, "Oh no, we would put even more money into education," and the Greens couldn't agree. And we're now hearing in the paper every day how they were split within themselves.
But the $23 billion, it's all borrowed money, isn't it?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
money that we actually haven't got. And I'll just tell you a little story around my dinner table. I put the argument to my 3 children. I said, would you rather have $23 billion spent on schooling? Do you think your school's under-resourced? They said, oh, not really. Or would you rather have, would you rather avoid having to pay back $23 billion, your generation, pay that back in debt in years to come? And they said, oh, we don't want the debt, we don't want the debt. Yeah, no. So there's school kids acknowledging the economics of this. It's money down the drain, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think if you could say, well, that $23 billion is going to produce $23 billion of improved educational outcomes, the case for it might be a little bit stronger. I would still probably argue that maybe not that compelling. But if we could point to a situation where kids are not being taught because of lack of money, then you could say, well, look, maybe. I don't want to see kids coming out of school that can't read and write and get jobs and participate in the world. That's not the case. We've been throwing money at schools for a decade, as I said. Education standards are going down. In relative terms, we're slipping down the world scale. Countries that spend a lot less on education per student are going up the scale. We're doing something wrong. And the answer is not money, that's for sure. So, I oppose spending more money. My view is spend the money that we're already spending better and get some value for it.
Well, unfortunately, you're in a minority of two. Hopefully that can change into the future. But to your credit, prior to the May budget, you also brought out an alternative budget plan. And I think all Australians were shocked on budget night when it turns out Labor's the same as Liberal, Liberal's the same as Labor with tax and spend, debt and deficit. You've got an alternative approach. And if you can walk us through these 4 graphics that David's brought in to have a look at the budgetary situation in Canberra. The first of them is a graph there that looks at the growing welfare state. The 4 colours there combined are social security, health, education and defence. It starts out, David, just before the Whitlam era. That first year is 71-72, and it shows that those 4 areas combined have grown from 45% of Commonwealth spending through to 65% today. How's it got out of control and what can we do about it?
Well, as you can see there, the big growth has been in health, welfare and education. They're the 2 big ones. And they've been growing substantially over the last, decades, ever since the Whitlam era. I mean, when Gough came in, we all were horrified by how much he increased government spending. But, compared to today's governments, and it's both sides of Parliament, both the current government and the previous Labor government, compared to Gough's era, they make Gough look like a miser. Scrooge, indeed, yes.
That's right, who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought, indeed. He loved throwing money at things. But didn't he set a pattern? And so, we do have a problem. The problem areas, it's not a defence, as you can see from that. As a share, it stayed pretty much the same. What's the blue one?
The blue one is health.
Health, oh yeah.
It's
okay.
grown as well.
It's grown as well.
Health. The yellow is social security and welfare,
purple.
and the blue is health, and those 3 combined obviously represent the biggest area of growth.
Yeah.
They've really ballooned, haven't they? They become the backbone of the welfare state.
Yes, that's right. And occasionally I hear people say, oh, we should stop spending money on submarines and defence in general, and there's lots to be saved in defence. But the point about it, of course, is even if we didn't spend a cent on defence, it really wouldn't make any difference to the overall trend. The overall trend is up, always up, being driven by health, education, welfare.
Yeah, and I suppose welfare, buying votes. Politicians love to give the welfare money away and buy the votes. And the second graph you've got is the growth in government per capita, per person. So if we can look there at the growth, well, it's alarming, isn't it?
That is very alarming. That's after inflation, so we're not talking about the effect of inflation. What we're seeing is a steady, inexorable, almost inexorable increase in both revenue and spending, because once governments get money, they can't help but spend it. They don't give it back to us in tax cuts too often. And it's just a steady growth pretty much ever since the Whitlam years. And if you look on the far right there, you'll see the forecast as well. The government is forecasting revenue will catch up to spending, and you can notice that the blue line is revenue and spending is above it. So that's the reason we've got a deficit and also why we've accumulated debt. And the government is forecasting that revenue will catch up to spending over the forecast period. That's totally unbelievable. They've been forecasting that every year for about the last 10 years and it's not happened yet.
It's an amazing increase, isn't it? 6,000 up to 15,000 per person,
absolutely
growth
dramatic.
of government.
We are a highly taxed country and the problem is too much spending. You know, we have these arguments from time to time. Do we have a spending problem or a revenue problem? The answer is if spending didn't go up all the time, there wouldn't be this perennial chase or this constant chase for more revenue. So putting taxes up. You know, the Medicare levy is going up. The bank tax went up. The bank tax is nothing but a revenue chase. You know, all this justification about, oh, banks a special and all that sort of stuff. It's a load of nonsense. It's just a revenue chase.
Yeah, well, all the way. And the third graph is outlining Liberal Democrat policy and looking at the possibility of tax cuts. So talk us through this one.
Yes, okay. So
This is your alternative budget.
This alternative budget, yeah. So each year for the last 4 years, I've presented an alternative budget in the financial review. And so I've talked about specifically where would I cut spending in order to balance the budget and then and pay off the debt and bring us back into a situation somewhat like we had, you know, even when Whitlam was in power. So those are the areas I would cut. There would be cuts to health, welfare and various other areas, abolishing state grants, so let the states fund their own expenditure. Corporate welfare, there's quite a lot of money goes to companies in the form of welfare of various kinds. Foreign aid, except for short-term humanitarian assistance. Cutting out, handing out money to people who can't cut it in the commercial world. So artists who can't sell their products, ABC, SBS funding, all that sort of stuff.
Well, we support that. And of course the benefit there is to balance the budget and beyond that to pay back debt.
Yes.
But those tax cuts are massive, aren't they, to move to a 20% income tax system with $40,000 tax-free threshold?
Well, that's right. And one of my staff is ex-Treasury and he knows how to calculate, you know, what things cost. So this is not airy-fairy stuff. We do know that if we cut back on the spending areas that we believe, you know, don't deserve to be funded, aren't warranted, we could afford those sort of tax cuts. So our policy is, I think it's on the next graphic.
Yeah,
actually.
on the fourth graphic here, you can see the scale of the tax cuts, the current system versus David's proposal. David's proposal is the dark line there, and the red line's the current system.
Yeah.
And just to give you a guide to some of the savings, people earning $80,000 a year, it's a $10,000 tax cut. $100,000 a year, $17,000, and $140,000, not a huge income in places like Sydney and Melbourne, it's a $23,000 per annum tax cut. So you're talking the real deal here.
Yes, that's right. And the basis of this is that you can use that money more productively, more effectively than the government can. When the government is handing out money to people it likes or people it thinks need it or spending it on things, they don't spend the money anywhere near as efficiently as we do when it's our own money. We're careful about what we buy with our money and we get better value for it. And, you know, the old statement is if somebody else is spending somebody else's money, you know, they just don't care that much about it. You think about, you know, spending someone else's money to buy a present for somebody else. You know, how much time and effort are you going to put into it? Whereas if you're spending it on yourself, spending your money on yourself, you'll spend a lot of time thinking about whether you're going to get value for money and if it's the right thing.
Well, I think a lot of Australians would take heart from it because if you're a Liberal Party supporter, you'd be devastated that they produced a Labor-light budget, tax and spend, debt and deficit. So it's almost like Liberals that think, oh, maybe it's not possible to get tax cuts and bring the budget back into balance. And if you're a Labor supporter, well, you gave up on that years ago, you know, under Wayne Swan.
Yeah.
So at least you're showing Australians this budget fiscal restraint is possible and there can be a dividend and the economic benefit to kickstart the economy of these big tax cuts would be enormous, wouldn't it?
Yes. The Reagan tax cuts in America showed that. He lowered the tax progressively during his tenure as president with the support of Congress, of course. And in each occasion, the actual revenue that the government raised, the US government raised from the economy increased because the economy gathered more momentum. And that's what happens when you cut taxes. Business goes ahead, people get jobs, people pay taxes on their income, companies pay taxes on their corporate profits, and the government collects that. And of course it reduces the amount of welfare that the government has to pay because there are more people in jobs. So government spending can go down, government revenue can go up, they balance the budget, they can afford more tax cuts then after a little while. So you do it step by step as you bring the budget into...
a virtuous cycle.
Yes.
And the other issue I want to raise with you, just to finish up, you're here on Mark Latham's Outsiders, the beauty, the glory of alternative media.
Alternative media.
Now, doesn't this demonstrate that Australians these days, YouTube, Facebook, other options, have got literally thousands of places you can gather news, entertainment, videos and the like. Why do we need these media regulation laws? Isn't it time to get rid of them in Canberra as the government's proposing?
Yes, it is. I think it's time. In fact, I'm critical of Mitch Fifield's proposal said it doesn't go far enough.
Right, what would you do?
I would deregulate it entirely. I think this anti-siphoning, for example, for pay TV versus free-to-air TV, it's a ridiculous idea. They still want to put some restraints on how many media voices can be heard and that kind of thing. I would get rid of all of that. I don't think it helps at all. If there really is sufficient paranoia about not having a regional media, not having a radio station or a local paper or something like that. I mean, I don't approve of this, but if they can't get the nationals to settle down in any other way, or any of the other media that worry about that sort of thing, have the equivalent of a universal service obligation like we have with telephone service. So, you've got a town of, say, less than 10,000 people or 15,000 people, or something like that. You subsidise them. If you're really that's...
Yeah, I wouldn't even do that.
I wouldn't
Facebook
either.
is your alternative, because a lot of the newspapers have got the paywall. You go to Facebook and you're right in behind the paywall, you get it for free.
Yeah, that's right.
About 30 minutes later.
I agree, I wouldn't do that. I'm just thinking about the politics
I don't think
of
you
it.
need any subsidies, any rules. Like, there's some rent seekers out there, that silly Eric Beecher and Nick Xenophon and Dastiari saying, oh, we need government funding of newspapers. Well, bugger that.
I agree. I wouldn't do it in my ideal world. But the government is facing a problem, this perception that if they implement their laws, then regional media are going to miss out. So I'm just, and they have to convince Pauline Hanson that companies like Facebook or Alphabet, which owns YouTube and Google and so forth, should be allowed to have a free rein, while companies like News Corp and Fairfax shouldn't have a free rein, or any of the TV stations. I think it's insane. I mean, Pauline doesn't like multinationals, and yet by resisting these media laws, she's giving the big international multinationals
holding back Australian media
a leg
industry
up.
development.
And all I'm thinking of in terms of this, well, let's subsidise the small media in these little towns. If people are worried about it, all I'm thinking about is if that's what it takes to take the brakes off the media situation overall, then maybe that price is worth paying, because it would be cheaper than what it's... I mean, Channel 10's, in liquidation. Well, not in liquidation, in voluntary administration. People are going to lose their jobs. People in regional towns with jobs in papers and radio stations in particular, they're not going to be able to compete because of Google, YouTube, Facebook, and all the other media that's coming along. They're not going to be. They're going to lose their jobs, and the country towns that they care about, that Pauline and the National Party care about, they are going to suffer more because the regulations don't pass.
Well, hopefully your argument will prevail in the next session of Parliament. Thanks for joining us this evening. You've given us great hope, particularly the welcome idea that responsible budget management is still possible in Australia. Who would have thought? David Lionhelm doing a wonderful job in the Australian Senate. After this short break, we'll be back with Bernard Gaynor to talk about the dreadful impact of political correctness and left-wing ideology on the Australian Defence Force. Welcome back to Mark Latham's Outsiders, where I'm absolutely delighted. We're joined by Bernard Gaynor, who is a genuine Australian war hero. He was decorated for his service with Army intelligence in Iraq in 06, 08 and 09. Came back to Australia, joined the Defence Reserve, and in one of the most ridiculous instances of suppressing free speech, he was kicked out of that for an absurd PC matter. And Bernard, of course, has become a champion of free speech with various forms of action through the court. We've had him on the show previously to talk about all those free speech issues. But Bernard, it's great to have you back here this evening to talk about all these cultural changes in the Defence Force, because the leftist march through institutions, we know it's happening in schools, universities, the Human Rights Commission, the Parliament, parties. But when it gets to the point where it's running through the police services of the nation and the Defence Force, I mean, the pinnacle of national security, the Australian Defence Force, it's gone quite out of control, hasn't it? And I noticed earlier this week you highlighted an advertisement that's come up with the Defence Force trying to recruit devout Muslims. What's it all about?
Well, that's correct, Mark. So the PC march through defence is running rampant. They're turning the military from real warriors into social justice warriors. And just this week, the Navy has started advertising for devout Muslims, letting Muslims know that they'll set up mini mosques on bases and really trying to promote Islamic recruitment. And of course, this should be of great concern because we know more Muslims from the Islamic community in Australia have signed up already to fight for the Islamic State than the Australian Defence Force. And we've seen in other militaries great acts of terrorism. So Nidal Hassan, a major in the US Army, killed 13 US service personnel back in 2009. We've already had one Australian soldier go AWOL to fight in Syria for jihadi groups. This politically correct push for Islamic recruitment is very dangerous, and I'm concerned that we will see Australian soldiers die at home through this push.
So you're convinced it's weakening our capacity. The last place where we should have PC or virtue signalling or symbolic gestures is in the Defence Force. How is it weakening our capacity to defend the nation and do our work overseas?
Well, look, the first thing is we want good, patriotic Australians to sign up to fight for this nation. But when you have got a politically correct push to recruit from a certain segment of society, it means that vetting goes out the window. It means that morale will be endangered. I know many people within the military who would be very concerned about serving with a person who's been recruited because of their religious beliefs, especially Islamic beliefs at this time. We want people to sign up for this nation because they love Australia, not because
I suppose
Islamic.
if you're fighting for your country, you want a fighting machine next to you, don't you? That's your priority. You don't want a religious person, someone who's selected solely because of their religion. You want a fighting machine trained to the highest capability to do the job. So it must weaken morale.
Absolutely, and in fact, the Navy recruitment makes it very clear that they're recruiting Muslims even though they have different beliefs than everybody else, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when the focus on recruitment comes about promoting recruitment from a certain segment of society who are different than everybody else, it undermines cohesion, it undermines the team, it undermines morale.
Now, what's the story with this defence imam, Sheikh Salim? You've highlighted that he's made some comments that could be taken as sympathetic to Hizb ut-Tahrir, a radical organisation. You've launched a petition, and how close are we to seeing this bloke out of the show?
Well, look, I'm hopeful that he will go, but there's been no move yet by the government. But Senator Bernardi did raise the question in Parliament recently. The Defence Minister danced around the issue and basically supported the Defence Imam's right to express views in support of Hizb ut-Tahrir. And of course, this is very dangerous. Hizb ut-Tahrir, as we know, have called for an army to impose Sharia law in Australia, and they might just well get their way. If Defence is going to recruit Muslims because they're Muslims, we may well end up with an army that imposes Sharia law in Australia over time. It is a very dangerous situation.
Well, it seems to me that defence imam is a waste of money and a waste of space because, as Bernard just pointed out earlier, there are more Muslims fighting against us in the Middle East, foreign fighters in places like Iraq, than have actually signed up to the Australian Defence Force. And here on Mark Latham's Outsiders a few weeks ago, we had Kaiser Trad, certainly no conservative. He's been involved with Sheikh Al-Aili and other radicals, other progressive people in Islam in the past. So Kaiser Trad had this to say about the defence imam. Not even Kaiser could defend this bloke. Let's have a look at the clip. It's inappropriate, isn't it, that he supported...
I was a chaplain with the Department of Defence for 8.5 years, totally unpaid. I used to give briefings to forces to be deployed overseas, and my purpose was always to try and help avoid incidents, to hopefully that our troops would be just peacekeepers and come back safely to Australia without any incidents involving any of the locals. So I did that work for 8.5 years, and whilst I don't see myself as controversial, there have been some controversies about me. I know the imam in question. I've met him before. I am surprised of the statement, of his statement with respect to Hizb ut-Tahrir. Most people would know that there's no love lost between me and that group. In fact,
So Bernard, how significant is it that not even Kaiser Trad can defend the defence imam?
Well, I think it's very significant. Kaiser Trad, as we know, is very outspoken in favour of Islam in Australia, for instance, but not even he is prepared to defend a bloke who's gone on the public record to support Hizb ut-Tahrir. And I think the Defence Minister really needs to have a good hard look at what's going on inside the Defence Force, because the social justice warriors are running the show, and they're coming up with these crazy ideas. And it's not just with Navy Islamic recruitment or the defence imam. It's right across the board. Defence is really it's no longer focused on defending the nation. It can't get its ships out to sea. It's struggling to recruit properly, but it's focused on all these social justice issues.
Why is that? Where has this come from? I would have thought the last place that needed diversity agenda or cultural change is the Defence Force. It doesn't need all the PC stuff. This came from David Morrison, didn't it, 4 or 5 years ago? And it snowballed into something even more significant?
Well, I don't know if David Morrison was the cause, but he certainly had played a large part in all of this, and his legacy lives on today. But where does it come from? I think the senior hierarchy are focused on the HR awards, the human rights awards and the recruitment awards, and they're not focused on winning the real awards, which are the military battles and the military wars. We haven't won the wars in Iraq or Afghanistan, but Defence has got a whole cabinet full of human rights awards over the last 10 years.
And they're running training courses, aren't they, on unconscious bias and all this sort of nonsense. You keep a lot of contact with your former colleagues. What are the men saying about it?
Yeah, so there was a course run late last year for junior officers in the Army, and it included a visit to a mosque and a 2-hour lecture on why people should convert to the Islamic faith. And this lecture didn't just promote Islam, it also rubbished other religious beliefs, including Christianity. And I just want to read out one quote from this course, because I think people will be astounded when they hear it, because they had the Qantas diversity manager came to this course, and she told the course, diversity cannot thrive unless everyone agrees. If there were people who didn't agree, we remove them. That's how Qantas deals with diversity. Diversity actually no longer means what it says in the dictionary. It is about conformity to a certain set of beliefs.
It's like groupthink, that she's actually saying that if you don't sign up to this diversity agenda and the BS of unconscious bias, then you're out. You'll be the best soldier, the most capable, best trained person to defend our nation. But if you don't sign up to a political agenda, an ideological agenda, they show you the door.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And that's what diversity means today.
Well, I got a letter just yesterday from a member of the Defence Force. I want to read out what he had to say. Defence is planning to throw merit out the window when conducting selection exercises within the department and basing recruitment and promotion decisions on someone's gender. Merit has been the cornerstone of filling positions within the public service. To now start discriminating against men in the name of equality by treating men unequally seems to be hypocrisy of the highest order. So this is someone in the administrative side of things. So it's not just the combat personnel, it's right through the whole department.
Yeah, and that letter actually is confirmed by a speech given by the Chief of Army late last year, and another one early this year, in fact, around International Women's Day. He acknowledged that about 11 to 12% of the Army was female, but he went on to say that 18% of unit commanders were female. So I don't think females are 50% more capable than male, which those statistics would indicate. In fact, what it means is that females are getting a 50% greater leg up into the promotion path than blokes because of their gender.
Yeah, goodness, why isn't this a major national scandal? Why is the mainstream media basically look the other way to this? I think your average Australian would be horrified about the facts and quotes we're presenting here this evening. Why isn't this on the front page of every national newspaper and every major TV bulletin to highlight the absurdity of what's happening to our Defence Force?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark. I think it's because people are more afraid of being called a racist or a bigot or a sexist person than actually having an army that can't fight wars and defend a nation. They're more afraid of the name calling than having a nation that can't defend itself.
It's a fool's paradise, isn't it? I mean, when push comes to shove, if we were in some regional conflict, a lot of this stuff will tell against us, and politics is not going to save lives. Politics is not going to win wars. There's a lot of areas where Australia seems to be going down the garden path, not realising what's happening, such as energy policy, the economy, and I suppose defence is another area just like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we do about it?
Well, I think we need to speak out, and unfortunately my personal experience shows when you do speak out, there's a cost. You take a personal hit, but we need more people to speak out, and I know that there are many, many soldiers within the Defence Force who have contacted me over the last 4 years. They are grateful that I've spoken out, and that's why I continue to speak out about it. But we need more people to stand up and actually question the rhetoric. It is baseless rhetoric. There is no substance to it. It is just, it's a charade in order to promote, someone's alleged moral standing in today's society. But it's got nothing to do with defence capability at all.
Well, I think you're a hero when you were in the service, and you're a hero outside of it because of the stance you're taking. It should be on the front page of newspapers around the country, and it's because of you, in large part, that we're even talking about it tonight. And there's more evidence all the time, isn't there? Just earlier this month, Kate Jenkins, who's the Sex Discrimination Commissioner at the Human Rights Commission, she went on what looked like a Kentucky tour of the Middle East, a bit of a tourism thing, and she's produced a report. But I think the findings of this report just highlight how shallow and superficial the diversity and cultural change agenda actually is. Because Jenkins came back and wrote, despite women representing less than 10% of the deployed community, all of the members we spoke to felt valued and part of the team. This experience has shown me the ADF at its best. So it just highlights the point. What's the difficulty here in just allowing people to serve, be recruited on merit and get on with the job? Because Defence has a target of 25% women. So if they're doing the job superbly in the Middle East, according to Kate Jenkins, with less than 10%, she doesn't say whether they're combat or non-combat personnel, but less than 10% of females, why do we need to go to a 25% quota?
Well, there's no need to go to 25%, Mark, but they will push. They'll push and push because they are promoting an ideological cause. It is about feminism. It is about destroying the Defence Force, which is probably one of the last institutions that is male-oriented, and for good reason. You don't need to be an expert in biology to understand why. When women can play first-grade rugby against men, I think you'll have a good argument for equal selection across the board. But they want to destroy the last bastion of an institution that is dominated by males because of their biological traits.
Well, it is feminism, and it started with Liz Broderick, didn't it? The previous Sex Discrimination Commissioner, she came in and did that work with David Morrison, and this whole absurdity of cultural change has come from that. But just quoting further from the Kate Jenkins report, and I mean, I think this is belittling and humiliating and so shallow. She'd write this way: walking around the bases, these are Australian defence bases in the Middle East, I noticed evidence of the diversity among deployed members. She doesn't produce any statistics in the report to say, there's 5% Indigenous serving, there's 3% African, 20% Asian. She's basically gone around so shallow to look at the colour of people's skins. Does that fellow look ethnic? Does that person look like a migrant? And reporting there's diversity among deployed members with no statistical justification for it. This is an absolute sham, isn't it?
Well, it is a sham, and I can tell you, when I served, there were many people in the Defence Force who came from various ethnic backgrounds. They didn't need to be cajoled into joining. They didn't need a special program. They joined because they loved Australia. And back then, I joined because recruitment was focused on bringing people into the Defence Force who were focused on giving something for the country. Now it's all about recruiting special minority groups and providing some significant benefit to them. And it takes the focus away from what the Defence Force is about, which is to protect Australia.
And it's demeaning for those people to sign up to fight for their country, to be at these bases in the Middle East and have someone, a flunky like Kate Jenkins, who's a quasi-politician, walking around saying, I notice you've got a certain skin colour, or you look like a migrant, and I'm going to write in my report, we've got diversity. Now, diversity is not going to win any wars, it's not going to win any battles, and it's demeaning, isn't it, for people who should be honoured in their role in the Defence Service to be treated this way and looked at like specimens in the diversity zoo.
Well, I know when I was on operations in Iraq, we used to get visits from politicians from time to time, and they were, to be quite honest, an absolute pain in the neck, because you have to stop what you were doing and go and pretend to listen to someone. And to have someone from the Human Rights Commission fly all the way to Afghanistan to take photos with soldiers on operations and then pretend to come back and write some grade 10 school tourist report
It is like that, yeah. it is.
about her trip to Afghanistan. It really is embarrassing, and it is a complete waste of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and most of the photos in that report, they're white people, you know, and I don't care if the soldiers are white, black, yellow or anything else, as long as they can fight and do our country proud.
Well,
So-
Mark, here's an idea. Next time they have a sex discrimination commission, and maybe they should put someone ethnic in there, because I noticed that the last couple of them have been white females.
They are. No, they're all ethnically cleansed to be white females, as you say. Now, Bernard, your very important court cases coming up. We need people to support you because we're all cheering for you. You've got the matter in the High Court and some other stuff on the go. What's the update?
Yeah, sure. So there are now 5 matters in relation to a Court of Appeal ruling I received earlier this year that said that New South Wales anti-discrimination law couldn't be applied against anybody outside New South Wales. New South Wales, Gary Burns, a homosexual activist, and the New South Wales Attorney General appealing that. The High Court's just granted leave, so I'll be fighting that as strongly as I can, plus my appeal against the full court's decision to uphold the Chief of Defence Force's decision to terminate my commission. It's a whole mouthful. That is going to be heard. The oral arguments in relation to leave to appeal, that will be heard on the 18th of August.
And how can people pitch in financially to help you? Because I know this has been an onerous process, you need the backing. What can they do?
Sure, well the legal fees have cost about 250 grand so far, so any support is gratefully received. But if they go to my website, bernardgaynor.com.au, there'll be a little tab at the top where they can donate.
Okay, bernardgaynor.com.au and kick in and donate to Bernard. He's a champion of free speech. He's a champion of the right approach for the Australian Defence Force. He served our country and we should support him 100%. So I want to thank you, Bernard, for coming in this evening and giving us all that information. And we'll be back after a little break to look at Zeg's cartoons. We're going to go through all the viewer feedback, the letters segment, the first one we've had. And also, I've been warning you, the left lunacy of the week. You won't believe what this imbecile's been up to, the things he's talking about. The left get crazier by the week, and we keep on reporting it here at Mark Latham's Outsiders. Back in a short while. Welcome back. Not many shows, in fact not many programs have got a resident cartoonist, but here at Mark Latham's Outsiders we're lucky enough to have the great Zeg as our cartoonist in residence. He does a wonderful job and he's got 2 cracking cartoons for us this evening. The first of those is a reflection on the dreadful Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young, all alarmed that they've got those bollards up in Martin Place, Sydney. Hanson-Young thinks that the bollards there are going to disconnect the terrorists, going to alienate them, cause them trouble. She's knocking over the bollards because she doesn't want the poor old terrorists to be disconnected from anything. So that's a great reflection on a terrible Senator Hanson-Young. And Zeg, he's at it again, looking at the scene in Canada where apparently they're introducing penalties, severe penalties for people misusing pronouns. This is another restriction on freedom of speech. And Zeg has nailed it in this cartoon. The guy's there in jail, the hate crime of mispronouncing or misusing a pronoun. And he says, I haven't seen Jim, I mean Shim, since we played in our high school ice hockey team. So Zeg, whether he's talking about the Australian scene or Canada, is right on the job. He's doing a magnificent piece of work for our program here, and we thank him very much for being our cartoonist in residence. And speaking of Zeg, he's drawn up the graphic here for our next segment, something we haven't done in the past. We want to give you, the viewers, as much feedback as possible. You've got wonderful opinions you send in, week out. And we're going to have a segment of viewer feedback. It's called The Outsiders Outhouse. And you can see Zeg's wonderful graphic here where he's got me there on the Thunderbox. In truth, with all these restrictions on free speech in Australia, the outhouse is probably the last place now where you can have a free expression of what you're thinking, what you're saying, what you're wanting to achieve in the future. So we're going to have the outhouse there as our ultimate symbol of free speech for you, the viewers, and your opinions. And to send them in, the address is there. mark.latham@therebel.media, mark.latham@therebel.media. And our first contribution is a very important letter that's been sent in from David. He teaches at a well-known Australian university, and David writes as follows. In the world of gender bias gone mad, here's one to highlight, Mark. Mathematics, physics and engineering tend to attract more males than females, and as such are often the object of the university gender experts. Here's an example of a female academic, Bridget Locke, being escalated to the position of Professor of the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at La Trobe University. Well, we know La Trobe University from developing the Safe Schools program. And this Ms. Locke has a research record consisting of only 2 papers in mathematics. And David writes, I would think 50 to 100 papers are normal for appointment to the senior position of professor. Every week at work, I get an email as an academic about some special funding or scholarships for women. She's been made professor after only 2 maths publications. Does anyone think women need help getting promoted? Well, David, you're absolutely right. We know there's madness in the university sector, and you've demonstrated there the lopsided appointment of a professor who's not properly qualified, and this is not the way to do things. In Australia, we've always been a wonderful meritocracy in the education system. You need the qualifications to get ahead, and if Ms. Locke hasn't got them, then of course it's unfair to the applicants who've missed out, much better qualified, and it just goes to show ultimately the students would suffer. If the academic hasn't got the best qualifications, it's the students, our children, who suffer well into the future. Our second piece of outsiders outhouse rhetoric and contribution comes from Thomas, a big Canuck fan. So he's from Canada. We welcome all the international viewers of this program, and he just wanted to say he'd watched our show about immigration to Australia, the moderate Muslim, that's Emma Eros, and the interview with Jordan Peterson. He says, I loved it. I live in Ottawa, Canada, and have been watching the Rebel media about one month into its start after 2015. I mention this because I want you to know that you fit in perfectly. Well, isn't that nice, Thomas, for you to say that? I feel like I'm fitting in well with Rebel Media and enjoying the experience 100%, and I hope you're enjoying the show 100%, along with all your Canadian colleagues. And finally, we've got a letter from Louise from Goulburn. Louise from Goulburn speaking very frankly about the situation with Christopher Pyne and this debate inside the Liberal Party about same-sex marriage. And she writes, I can't believe what's gone wrong with the Liberal Party under Malcolm Turnbull and treacherous little turncoats like Christopher Pyne. Now he's openly boasting of how he stabbed Tony Abbott in the back and will deliver homosexual marriage, quote, sooner than anyone thinks. And he did say that. Another broken election promise from a party that looks more like Labor every day. If Mr Pyne thinks gay marriage is so great, why doesn't he move overseas to sign up? That would have the double benefit of getting him out of the Parliament and out of the closet in one hit. Tough speaking from Louise from Goulburn, but I'm sure a lot of Liberal Party supporters, Tony Abbott supporters around the country would be supporting and endorsing her words. Well done, Louise from Goulburn. We need some straight talk to sort out the modern Liberal Party, indeed the modern Australian Parliament. So if you want to send in your comments for next week's show, please remember that email address, mark.latham@therebel.media. Love to see your contribution, love to air it on the program. And we've got one final item that I want to bring forward. It comes from a mate of mine, John from Leeton, who's got a graphic here that I want to bring up. And he's asking, do you know why this guy says he deserves government assistance? Have a look at the bloke. Fair dinkum. He's got a head on him only a mother could love. He's got a head on him worse than a boarding house pudding. And the answer is, he says he can't get a job. Well, no wonder looking like that. I mean, you can talk about your welfare bludgers, but if they don't scrub up, they've got no hope of getting off the taxpayer teat. Well done, John from Leeton. Well done to all the contributors who've made this our first Outsiders Outhouse. Now, finally, for the show, one of the things we want to focus on every week, of course, is left-wing lunacy. Plenty of it out there. In picking the lefty lunatic of the week, it's a very high bar. How do you sift through all the material? There's a galaxy of it available. Well, we've come up with a contribution that David Roy, regrettably a lecturer in the School of Education at Newcastle University, made on the ABC drum program last Friday. His big issue of the week, kiddies' toys. Let's hear from the absurd David Roy.
Toys that are created for boys and girls, which I still can't believe that we separate the two. In fact, I think it really damages society.
It is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, if you want to do arts and crafts and you're male, you've got to buy pink and purple items from the girls' aisle. Why can't girls play with action figures? Why do they get put in the boys' section? And now we have Barbie coming out with some bodymorphic Kens, and again it's targeted towards girls. Well, why can't boys and girls play together? Why can't they all have action figures? You see, the thing with these toys is they're good for both, because kids can role play, can actually explore concepts and ideas. Now, I have real concern concerns with Barbie and Ken and them promoting an idealism of body fascism to really young children. Because even these new Ken models that have come out, they're still not normal. In places like Big W and Target, they actually see boys' toys, girls' toys, and I'm like, slapping my head.
It's so archaic.
This is surely just a marketing device.
But what do you think
divide and
markets to
create two
everyone?
consumer
Yeah,
bases.
No, there's a bigger issue. When the Batman versus Superman movie came out last year, there were 4 figures available. 3 were males, one of which is only in the movie for 15 seconds. We had to go to 6 different stores before we could find a Wonder Woman figure for my son.
Just what every boy wants, the Wonder Woman doll. I mean, it's hard to believe, but that imbecile is teaching in an Australian university in education. So presumably teaching the school teachers of the future. I mean, you wonder why Australian schools are going so bad. You wonder why our universities are going so bad. His big issue of the week was kiddies' toys. And he's asking the question, why don't girls and boys play together? Well, of course they do, if they choose to. If they choose to. And it doesn't really matter if we've got separate boys and girls' toy sections in the department stores. That is also a matter of free choice, because the department stores are subject to a million consumer decisions, the wonder of the free market, a million free, open, diverse consumer decisions every day right through the Australian economy. And obviously the consumers have spoken, and the department stores have decided, for the benefit of those consumers, have some boys' toys in one section and girls' toys in the other. But I've also got to say, to be so focused on this is a kind of sickness. I find it creepy to see a grown man like that talking about kiddies' toys like it's a really, really big issue. What we're actually seeing here is the sickness of the left. They couldn't control the economy in the old Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall dispensed with that. They couldn't control social policy. They couldn't control the actions of government. They're always trying to control our society, and now they're trying to get into social control through feelings, behaviours and kiddies' toys. You know, this is a guy desperate to make everyone in society like him. He probably talks about diversity. He's not after diversity. He wants a society where everyone behaves just like him, and every boy's got to have a Wonder Woman doll just like his son. It really is a sickness of the left to be so focused on social control to the point you're worried, almost paranoid about kiddies' toys. Why not just let the kids grow up the way they want to? They'll make their choices about the toys they play with. They'll make their choices about playing with other boys, other girls, of course. And consumers, the parents, will make their choices in the department stores. Millions of choices in a free market economy every day. It's a beautiful thing. And we don't need these social engineers. We don't need these totalitarian types with their left lunacy, all worried about children's toys. It's so pathetic. And on that note, we're going to finish Mark Latham's Outsiders. Having revved up the left for what they are, they really do need to be exposed at every turn. So hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget our website, marklathamsoutsiders.com. You can register for all the Rebel Australia activities, marklathamsoutsiders.com. Please sign up to that petition, teardown-that-curtain.com. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show. Plenty of material, and we'll be doing it again next Wednesday. Join us then.